Well, I'm joined now by the leader of the Democratic Alliance, John Steenhuisen. Mr. Steenhuisen, thank you very much for your time this evening. My first question was going to be about what you thought of Cyril Ramaphosa in Parliament today, but I think there's a more pressing issue. I'm sure that the DA is absolutely delighted that the IEC has been dismissed by the Constitutional Court. Just tell me why you are so pleased, bearing in mind that there are some real concerns that this election might not be as well attended by people who are afraid of getting COVID-19.
Sure, Sally. I mean, obviously, we're delighted with the outcome. The court's given us every argument that we made around not postponing and allowing a registration weekend, and I think that's certainly to be welcomed. I think the IEC, and particularly Mr. Mashinini, are going to have to consider their options now, because this has been, I think, an embarrassing debacle for the IEC. But, of course, this election is going to be like no election we've had before. And it has been the way of the world for the last 2 years that business, civil society, community organizations, and ordinary citizens have had to adapt to what is called the new normal of the COVID-19 pandemic. And political parties and the political process themselves cannot be immune to that. The businesses and all these other people I've spoken about have had to find ways to adapt to the COVID-19 environment. I don't buy the ANC's argument about freeness and fairness or about attendance. They've won a string of by-elections over the course of the last year and a half. Are they saying that those were unfree and unfair elections? And are they going to then give those seats back if they were unfair? And then lastly, to say that we saw 2 weeks ago in Zambia, they had a very successful election that was very well attended. I attended an election as an observer in Somaliland just over 4 months ago. It was also well attended and record turnouts, and in which the government changed, the parliamentary balance of power changed hands. So I think these things are possible, and they are in the realm of the doable. We can't allow coronavirus, we don't know how long it's going to be with us, to derail our democratic processes and the accountability processes that are desperately needed at local government level.
How do you campaign during COVID?
Well, I've been campaigning for the last year and a half. The DA has adapted very early on to the new environment. Of course, you can still do door-to-door, and we've still been holding public meetings. I had a series of meetings this week all across the Northwest Province, from Lichtenburg to Rustenburg. And, of course, you've got to adapt to the new protocols, and there is a new normal, hand washing, social distancing, limitation of numbers, but it is still possible to campaign. As we've seen during by-elections, hundreds of by-elections held around the country over the course of the last year and a half, campaigning is possible, just as business is possible, and just as civil society organizations are able to do their business. It just requires an adaptation to the new environment. And if we as political parties expect the rest of the country to adapt, I think that it's only reasonable to expect that we adapt as well.
Do you think that there is the possibility that there will be real concerns about whether this election has been held correctly? And I'm looking at, concerns around the party lists, and we know that the ANC is probably in the biggest trouble with so many of their candidates not able to have been put down on time on those lists. But we know that other parties have been similarly affected. Do you think that there is a possibility of a further legal challenge to stop this election before it actually goes ahead at the end of October? And I'm thinking whether that's someone to say it's got to actually go through Parliament now, or we know that the Apex Court is the final arbiter. But do you expect any other challenge to come forward to try and stop this?
The only other challenge that I think would be possible would be to attempt to try and amend the Constitution through the Parliament. But Parliament and the Constitution has a series of preventative measures which stop you from drunk dial changing the Constitution. And so there are mandatory timeframes that would push the election, would push the realm of the possible way outside what could be achieved. So I don't think that's possible. I also think we've got a body of legal precedents of what happens when parties are unable to submit their lists on time according to the timetable. The NFP was cancelled completely out of the last local government elections for precisely the same thing. The IFP were barred from standing in a number of local municipal elections because they didn't get their lists in on time. It is the reality. There's a timetable. We've all been working to the same timetable. We've all as parties had exactly the same constraints. We've all had to use exactly the same computer system. The DA managed to get a candidate in every ward in the country, a list in every municipality, and all of our deposits paid on time. I don't think that any party must blame their own ineptitude on the IEC or other people.
I have to ask you a little bit about what happened in Parliament today. Lots of interesting answers coming from the President, but you and him had a bit of a ding-dong, didn't you? I mean, you were accused of making a mockery of the President, I think by Pemi Majudina, because you were suggesting that he was getting his answers coached because you saw shadows moving over across him. He says that shows the extent to which you've lost it. You said the Deputy President's medical treatment in Russia was a bit of an indictment against national health insurance plans. And it's such a stark difference to what I heard from you when you flew into KwaZulu-Natal a few weeks ago, just after the July unrest. And you were saying, you know what, this is a time for us all to be hands on deck. And that made me hopeful, because I'm just thinking that as we go forward to these local elections, coalitions and working together as political parties are going to become more and more important if we want to get anything done, especially at local level. So how productive, when you look back at this afternoon, did you find what the President had to say, and also perhaps your reaction to him?
Well, I think that you mustn't mistake the hurly-burly of parliamentary politics for anything more than what it is. It happens in parliaments the world over, and question times should be and are robust in any parliament of the world. It's our job as the official opposition to ask the tough questions of the President. It's not our job to sit there in a family meeting and have him have his way over us. And I think that the questions that we asked, they were all pertinent. Did South Africans pay for David Mabuza to go to Russia? And the answer was yes. We've seen those very important questions being asked today, and the answers, I think, were dissatisfactory. I think it was the President who got personal. I mean, I've never had a go at the President's on a personal level, and I think that when he stooped to that level today, I think he unfortunately let the veil slip, and I think he did himself a disservice. And I think he realised that, which is why he came back and apologised so profusely near the end of the session. But certainly, politics is hurly-burly. We've all got to have broad shoulders and move on. I don't do what I do in Parliament, for petty point scoring. It's around holding the executive accountable as the Constitution wants us to do, and that's what prevents things like state capture and the like happening. When you have a robust Parliament which is not tame and which doesn't simply expect people to kowtow. It doesn't mean that I have any less respect for the President because I ask him a tough question, and it doesn't mean that in the future we cannot find a way to work together in the best interests of South Africa, as I've committed my party to doing. But there are times in Parliament where it's going to be a hurly-burly, and we must accept those are the slings and arrows of politics, and particularly parliamentary politics. And I think South Africans should celebrate the fact that we've got a robust Parliament where those questions are allowed to be put without fear or favour. And I think the President's answers left more questions than answers.
Unfortunately, though, what we have seen, and maybe there's not a direct line, but we have seen that at local government level, when there are coalitions, they very often fall apart. I was speaking to Prince Mashele last night, and he predicts, and he reminded us that he was right in his predictions for the last election. He predicts that the ANC will lose more support at the polls, which is going to mean more coalitions. How committed is the DA to working in coalitions, and are you prepared for a reality of more and more coalitions after the local elections in October?
Absolutely, Sally. Obviously, look, we're going into these elections to win as many municipal councils as we can. The ANC's failure to register may assist us tremendously in that regard. But where we can form coalitions based around core values and principles, we can do this. What we won't be doing is going to government for government's sake or coalition for position's sake. Where we can come together on a common set of objectives and principles with a common program of action that will benefit that municipality or the people of that municipality, we will form a coalition with any party. that shares those values and principles. If we can't do that, we will take our seats on the opposition benches and be a robust and very good opposition, as you saw playing out in the Parliament of the country today.
Thank you very much for your time, John Steenhuisen, leader of the
Thank you,
Democratic Alliance, chatting to us. The DA, of course, welcoming the news that the postponement of the election bid has been dismissed.